We have some good polling news and also some pretty surprising polling news. And one polling response from the electorate has flipped. And it's one that Donald Trump very much would not like Harris to be leading in. We're to start though with the overall polling nationwide. She is now putting some distance between herself and Trump. Not a huge amount of distance, but in the newest New York Times Siena College poll, she has improved. She now leads by 3 points. Remember, it was the New York Times poll about 3 weeks ago that led to a lot of hair pulling from Democrats when things had tightened. And so she's up by 3. That doesn't sound great. Well, bear in mind in mid-September, right after the first and only presidential debate, in that exact poll, they were tied at 47 each. And so she has gained 3 points since then. She also, by the way, in some specific groups has shored up her support. So she apparently has got 9% of Republicans who now say they plan to support her, up from 5% last month. I guess maybe hanging out with Liz Cheney and constantly talking about Dick Cheney endorsing you maybe has helped a little bit. Still gross, and I don't like it, but maybe it's helped her with some Republicans. But anyway, set that aside. We'll return to it. The most interesting result, okay, not who you're gonna vote for, but when you ask something specific about the candidates, here's one. Who is the candidate that represents change? And that always has been Donald Trump's thing, right? He's a change candidate, even though he's been a billionaire for literally decades. He's run for president multiple times. He was the president. He's still somehow the change candidate. Well, people aren't buying it. She now leads on that metric by 2 points. In past polling, I believe every other time this has been polled, Donald Trump has led. And to some extent, it makes sense, perhaps. Harris is an incumbent right now. She's the VP. He's out of office. But they still think, they look at everything they've been, everything they've said, everything they're advocating for, and by a very narrow margin, but a narrow margin nonetheless, they say that Harris is actually the one more likely to represent change to the status quo. And that, I think, was the idea that he's anti-establishment, he's a change agent, an agent of chaos, however you want to put it, has always been one of Donald Trump's main appeals to his voters. And that seems to be cracking a little bit, but what do you think?
It's interesting to me because of a couple of things. One, Donald Trump, like you mentioned, John, actually was president. He actually has a record. We actually remember what it was like to live in a country under his presidency and administration. So, in a sense, he is kind of a kind of incumbent. Whereas Kamala, yes, she's in the sitting regime, but she has no power. She's done nothing in that regime, no matter what JD Vance tried to sell us during that debate, where he basically made Kamala the judge, jury, and executioner of the entire United States of America. But I think they've both been fighting for that change agent sort of position, right? Where Trump is trying to say, look, you don't want Biden anymore. You're not interested in this. Let's do something different. And Kamala's saying, look, I'm not Biden's old ass. I'm not Trump, who's already been president. We already did it. I'm a new sort of flavor and thing. And I guess according to this poll, some of that is actually working despite the best efforts of the Trump and Vance campaign.
Yeah. I mean, look, I love we can speculate about why exactly. I think good point that she's the incumbent, but not in a way that really matters. That's definitely true. She's never been in charge. It's a great point. Also, I don't know the exact number. I think she's 84 years younger than Donald Trump. So that's significant. There's a generational thing. And so I like that people are getting that simply because Donald Trump, sorry, I was gonna say that he says drain the swamp, but as producer Mike and I talked about earlier, he doesn't even say that anymore. He barely even talks about that. But it would just be branding even if he did. It doesn't mean, the only thing that's gonna change, I guess, is corporate taxes could technically go even lower, I suppose. There could be fewer regulations, protections for you and your family. So I'm glad that people are savvy to that. Now that said, really fast, there's a couple interesting things that people need to know. So they have Harris up by a couple points. How does that compare to other recent polls? Well, all of the polls over the past few weeks do show Harris up. The amount that they show her up by varies by poll from 2 points to 5 points, but she has maintained her overall lead. Now, once you go down to the swing states, things are tighter, unfortunately. She still leads in a good number of them, but the leads are 2 points and 1 point in New York, in the New York Times specifically, with Trump having the narrow leads in Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. So, tense and close. But here is the most exciting, probably waste of your time. What if the polls are wrong? Okay. What if the polls are wrong in the way that they were wrong in 2022? Or what if they're wrong in the way that they were in 2020? They're actually wrong in different directions. I don't know if most people know that, but here is what it would actually look like if the polls are wrong in that way. If we were to, I don't even know if it's unskewing the polls or whatever, but like if it's in the way that it was in 2022, then Harris has a nice healthy lead in almost all of those states. But if it's wrong in the way that it was in 2020, well, then Donald Trump actually is in a very comfortable position right now. And significantly, you can see on the right-hand side there what the electoral vote count would be based on that unskewing. And really, 2020 or 2022, if you modify the numbers to that, that's the difference between fairly dominating wins by other candidate. Now, I will say, if I had to choose, I guess I would have a little bit more faith in the more recent wrong polls, I guess, because you could say the narrative could be in 2020, they really underestimated Republican support. So they corrected for that in 2022, but oh no, they overcorrected and underestimated the amount of Democratic support. I'd rather be in that position than the opposite. Now, you talk to pollsters and they say they've learned from both of those elections as well as 2018 and 2016, and we should have more faith in the polls. I don't know where you're at on all of this, Waz.
I mean, Trump, when he's been on the ballot, has outperformed the polls, right? But this is not some large sample size. It's one election in 2016 and one election in 2020. Some of the other stuff, when you think about 2021 and 2022, as well as the midterms during his presidency, a lot of Trump-backed candidates got smoked at the ballot box. Again, viewers of this show, of course, because they're sharp and pay attention to this stuff, will remember the quote unquote red wave that was promised to us in 2022 that never came. So like Trump and his affiliates have underperformed the polls as well. But I tend to think, man, people kind of know who Trump is at this point. I think the pollsters themselves, if they're smart, have baked in this under counting of Trump support when he's been in the ballot. And we could probably say that the polls are pretty close. I mean, are pretty close to what it's going to be. And even if, you take the margin for error for what it is, this is a toss-up, guys. Like, there's no predicting this. Anybody that claims to know with certainty what's going to happen in November is either stupid or lying to you. So like, just go out.
Yeah.
Vote your conscience, vote your heart, vote your strategy, whatever. Blue MAGA, do whatever the hell you want. I don't care. But don't get too alarmed or too excited by any of this polling.
Yeah. I want to know. I want as much data as possible. I grew up watching Star Trek. I want to scan the nebula, even if it's not going to change my life. But that said, obviously you're right about the strategy. And the takeaway should be, everyone, if you can, clear your day for election day. Watch our coverage. We'll be doing live from when the polls close until God only knows how late it's gonna go. It is going to be a wild night. Okay, maybe literally. We'll find out together. Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.